The adjustment of your snare wires will play a pretty significant role on how your snare drum sounds overall. So you want to be able to adjust your wires so that it complements your particular style of playing. Now, although there's no real fancy, science to snare wire tension, it is cool to sort of know what this adjustment affects so that you know how to control it, so that you can help to tailor your signature snare sound, whatever that may be. I tend to have my own general adjustment that I like to do on all my snares, regardless of the size that I'm playing, whether it's a 10-inch or whether it's a 14 by 8, doesn't make any difference. I generally adjust my snare wires the same way, and I've since gotten a lot of requests from my snare drum tuning tutorial video to follow up with one on snare wire tension. So I'm going to do that now. Just give you a couple of tips. I'm not saying that this is gospel. I'm just telling you that this is how I do it. If you want to employ the same tips, that's cool. But I'm just going to show you how I arrive at my particular sound using snare wire tension. Now, initially, the rules for snare wire tension are pretty self-explanatory, right? Loose snare wires means you're going to get more rattle, more buzz. Tight snare wires obviously means you're going to get a lot less buzz, a little more snap. It's all personal preference and how you like to hear your snare drum. The second thing that you might not have been aware of, as far as what gets affected by your snare wire tension, is the tone of the shell. And this is just coming from experience, from owning a lot of snare drums, playing on a lot of snare drums, and just messing around with them. There's a pretty significant change in the tone of your snare drum according to how you adjust your snare wire. So I'm gonna show you how that gets affected, so that next time you do it, keep that in mind when you're adjusting your wires to your liking. So here's the thing. Every snare drum has a tone. Okay, if you grab your snare, if you want, throw off the strainer switch and just put a couple of fingers lightly on the edge just to get rid of a little bit of the ring, and just tap on top of your head, and you'll hear that there's a particular tone coming out of your snare drum. What I try to do when I adjust my wires to complement my style of playing is I like to hear sizzle. I like to hear snare buzz under there. I guess I would be considered more of a technical type of player. My left hand is pretty active on the snare drum. I do a lot of ghost notes and things like that. So I like a fairly loose snare wire tension because I want those things to rattle underneath there, so that all of my little nuances are noticeable. And it's pretty significant when you're playing at a venue and you got two mics on your snares, one on the top and one on the bottom. The one on the bottom is going to be picking up all of that snare action. So I kind of want a bit of a loose feel so that it can pick up all of the smaller stuff that I'm doing. So keeping that in mind, that's how I like to adjust my snares. My ideal sound is I want a nice 50-50 mix of sizzle and tone coming from the snare. That combined with the tuning method that you may have seen in the other video, that right there just kind of, it's like the icing on a cake. It really just helps accentuate the sound of my snare drum. So I'm just going to show you how I arrive at getting that. And then, if you want to use that tip for yourself, that's cool. But I'm just going to show you how I get that using my snare wire adjustment. All right, so let me show you how I do this real quick. The first thing that I do is I flip off the strainer. So I'm releasing the snares from the bottom of the drum. The next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to take this adjustment knob here and I'm going to back it all the way off. So I'm just releasing the snares even more from the bottom. And I'm going to back it all the way off to the point that even when it's back in the on position, there's still no contact with the wires touching the bottom head. So it's all the way off. So now, what I do is I grab a stick, and all I'm going to do from this point is I'm going to tap and turn. So with the adjustment strainer on the on position, what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to keep my hand on the adjustment knob here, and I'm going to start to tap the top head. And as I'm tapping, I'm just going to turn the adjustment knob and gradually bring the snares up until I'm happy with it, basically. And again, what I'm trying to do here is there's a specific tone out of the snare drum. I want to keep that. And all I'm going to try to do is add sizzle to the tone. I'll show you the opposite end of that after this, but right now I'll just show you how I do this. So I'm going to tap the top head, and as I'm tapping, I'm just going to turn the adjustment knob, and you'll hear eventually the snares make contact. And then from there, a couple of more half turns or whatever, and then it should be exactly where I want it. So let's do that. That should be good right there. So that's it. That's all it took. That right there is beautiful for me. That's exactly how I tune all of my snares. As far as the recipe goes for my snare drums, it's the same regardless of which one I'm playing. The recipe is always the same. Nice thin resonant head that's tuned real tight. Single ply, thin batter head on top, so either an Evans G1, coated ambassador from Remo, whatever. Single ply, 10 mil skin on the top. I like my snares wide open, and with this combination overall, my snare drum sounds like my sound regardless of what I'm playing, what room I'm playing in, whatever. That's my signature sound, and that's how I get it. So the other thing that I want to show you, that I wanted to get into, is I want to take it to the opposite end now. That was a fairly loose tension on the snare wires. With a loose tension, you can still hear a bit of tone coming out of the shell. Now what happens when you tighten it all the way up, and now the wires are sitting, pretty snug up against the resonant skin, you might notice that nothing wrong with that at all. It tightened it up quite a bit. You hardly hear any sizzle, and not half as much as you did before. But for me, I kind kind of lost a bit of the tone that I had there before. So that's why I like to keep my wires a little bit on the loose side, so I get plenty of sizzle. The tone sort of contributes to the overall full bodiness of the sound. And that's basically how I adjust my wires. It just takes a couple of seconds. Drop it, back the adjustment knob all the way off, flip it back in the on position, and then just turn and tap until they make contact, and then, you know, just adjust it to where you like it. So that's how I do mine. That's how I get my overall sound. Whether that helps you or not, I don't know. Hopefully it will. It just gives you something else to think about while you're adjusting your snare wires. And yeah, tip for the day. Hope it works for you.